What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today I'll be talking about the wide receivers I'd be starting and sitting this week. As always, if I don't answer your question, look at the website. That's my answer, though you should be able to gauge my interest in each player from this video. So, we'll get into the wide receivers in a second, but first, of course, have to start things off as usual. Side of the day, yesterday's stat was not counting Kyler Murray because he only played one game. That doesn't count. Top four quarterbacks in points per game in 4-point passing touchdown leagues over the last 5 weeks are Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson. I asked you guys who the fourth was. The answer is Kirk Cousins, though if we did this stat again, say next week, don't think he's going to make it after a fairly mediocre game last night. At ISOBuckets was first get that right on Twitter, and Davis Garrett was first get that right on YouTube. As for today's stat, among wide receivers with at least 100 targets, Justin Jefferson leads away with 15.2 yards per reception, who ranks second. All right, let's talk about some wide receivers. So one thing I want to note before we do that, sometimes I go over like weather to start off, definitely with last week, biggest thing for weather was obviously that Patriots-Bills games. There's nothing this week. There is not a game like that. There's not even a game that we're like slightly concerned about the weather. So don't even check on Sunday morning. There are not going to be any situations unless something crazy happens between now and Sunday where the weather changes. Don't even check. You're going to be fine with weather. You're not making any decisions because of that. So first game up, we've got Ravens at Browns. Low 43-point total. Browns 3.5-point, or actually 3-point now, home favorites. For the Ravens, Marquise Brown is really the only one you can trust. He has double-digit targets in 5 of his last 7 games and at least 4 receptions in all but one game this season. He's got like a pretty decent floor, higher floor than he had last year, and he's got a really nice ceiling to go along with that. So he's also due for some positive touchdown regression. He had 6 touchdowns in the first 7 weeks, and he hasn't scored since. So due for some touchdown regression. I'm viewing him as like a high upside wide receiver too, someone that if you've got him, you're very likely playing him this week. After Brown, wouldn't be using any of their other receivers. I love the talent of Bateman. I think in the future we're going to be using him consistently in fantasy, but until Baltimore starts using him more consistently in the offense, he's just not seeing enough volume to be started, and I want to play Sammy Watkins. For the Browns, Baltimore is a fairly neutral matchup for wide receivers, maybe slightly above average through their DVOA, but I would say it's a relatively neutral matchup. And given that the Browns aren't a team that focuses on their wide receivers, neutral. I'd say it's just a neutral matchup. Harrison Bryant has been ruled out. David Njoku's on the COVID list. He's probably not going to play, but of course, check that out. That means they're much less likely to run 2 tight end sets, right? They love 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets because they have good tight ends. If they only have Austin Hooper, they're probably running more sets that have multiple running backs or, 3 wide receivers. That's obviously a boost to the wide receivers. However, I don't think it's a big enough boost to where you're like playing their secondary receivers because of this. It's going to secure Jarvis Landry's target share. It's going to secure Austin Hooper's target share. It's going to make sure that the running backs are getting a good workload, but even with Landry, he can be played as a wide receiver too, or maybe like a low upside flex play, but even he isn't a fantastic play. And so for you to go out there and be starting like Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think it's thin. I think that you're like scraping for value, and I don't think you need to be doing that. If you're in like a competitive 14 or 16 team league, you need someone who can catch a 60-yard touchdown, sure, go for DPJ, but understand that like Njoku and Bryant, again, assuming Njoku's even out, they're only leaving behind like 6 targets, right? And that's probably going to go to Hooper, to the running backs, to Landry. So maybe 1 extra target for Donovan? Like, I don't see it. So Landry, I don't think you need to go to the secondary receivers. Next up, Dallas at the football team. Relatively high, especially for this week, 48-point total. And the Cowboys are 4.5-point now, road favorites. For the Cowboys, it looks like Amari Cooper is going to be back to a full snap share this week. So we can go back to viewing him kind of how he did to start this season and really viewing this entire wide receiver core that same way. CeeDee Lamb is a wide receiver 1, Amari Cooper is wide receiver 2, and Gallup is a wide receiver 3. Any of them could hit for like a top 5 week at the position, but it goes in that order, right? Lamb's the most likely to post a ceiling game, then Cooper, then Gallup. I think this is a good enough spot where you're definitely starting Lamb, definitely starting Cooper, and Gallup. He doesn't need to be started because he's not, a big enough part of the offense where he's just locked and loaded as an option every week. But I think he's a good enough play this week where you can play him in the flex. He should have around 3 to 4 receptions, around 45, 55 yards, a decent chance of scoring a touchdown against Washington, who is a very clear pass funnel, right? They're very, very bad at defending wide receivers, better at least at defending the run game. Also possible that they lean a little bit more pass heavy if Pollard is limited or even out in this game, because if he's out, do they really want to give Zeke 25 touches? No, right? So it'd be easy for them to lean more pass heavy. That's good for the wide receiver. So again, I'd play Lamb, I'd play Cooper, and Gallup, I think he's solid in the flex. You don't need to go there, but I think he'd still be a good play. Wouldn't feel bad about doing so. For the football team, it's McLaurin or bust. I would love it if we could use Curtis Samuel to close the season. I think he's a great wide receiver when healthy. I think there's a great opportunity on this team at wide receiver 2. No one's really taken over that role. But until he's fully healthy, until we see him go out there and get a consistent workload, a lot of snaps, you're playing McLaurin, you're not playing anyone else. Raiders at Chiefs. Up next, another 48-point total. Chiefs 10-point home favorites for the Raiders. Waller was a DNP again on Thursday. We'll see what happens today on Friday. Obviously, watch that status. I'm still expecting him to remain out this week. I don't think he's going to play, but if he does, of course, that's going to impact everyone, right? He's still the focal point of this offense, and if he's playing, I'd assume that, they're giving him a normal workload. Assuming he's out, though, I think Renfrow is going to remain like a wide receiver 2. He gets enough volume that even though it doesn't work downfield, he's used in the red zone. He's going to get close to double-digit looks. He's going to catch a high percentage of them. He'll be a good play. So I think you're playing Renfrow if Waller is out. And no one else. If Waller returns, then I think you're playing Darren Waller, and Renfrow becomes less appealing, but can still definitely be used in the flex just because they're still going to go to him, right? Of course, Waller is going to take some of those looks away, but they're still going to use Renfrow, and so I think you can still play him in the flex. My guess is, right now, he's a wide receiver 18. If Waller plays, he goes down to wide receiver 22, 23. So a small drop and not anything crazy. After Renfrow, it's no one. If you want to take a dart throw on Deshaun Jackson, thinking that KC's going to get up, they're going to have to be throwing it. He's someone that can get the ball downfield. Sure, but you better be really desperate in a 14 or 16 team league. Under no circumstance you're playing Deshaun Jackson in a 12 team league unless you're out of the playoffs and you're like, let's play him this week for fun. That'd be the only scenario. If you're trying to get into the playoffs and you're playing Deshaun Jackson, maybe there's a reason you haven't made it into the playoffs yet. For the Chiefs, obviously start Tyreek Hill, and I'd bench everyone else. It is a huge rotation behind Tyreek Hill, and no one is really making a clear case for targets. They're going to get some looks to Hardman. They're going to get some looks to Byron Pringle, some looks to Josh Gordon, but by some I mean 2 or 3, right? And no one's getting enough work to be used, and so it's Tyreek Hill. It's no one else who wide receiver core. Seahawks at the Texans. Up next, low 41.5-point total. Seahawks 8.5-point road favorites. It's a big road favorite there, especially for a team that hasn't been that great. For the Seahawks, this is obviously a good spot. The Texans are always a good matchup for everyone. Wilson has definitely seemed off since returning from the finger injury. He definitely returned too early, but he did look much better last week. And, I'd be sticking with Metcalf and Lockett. I know Metcalf in particular has been bad recently, but I can't justify benching him against the Texans, right? Especially when Wilson now looks healthy. If Wilson last week went out there and threw for 100 yards again, just did awful, maybe we can say that you just can't touch this passing attack. But he at least looked better last week. He's still getting these guys the ball. I just can't. I cannot bench DK Metcalf against the Houston Texans. And Lockett hasn't even been that bad recently, so I think you're playing both them as low 1s to high 2s, maybe more of high-end wide receiver 2s. I just think you have to be playing them. For the Texans, Brandon Cooks has also been bad. Also, it's been quarterback play that's causing it. He's been pretty decent as a wide receiver. It's just they haven't been able to get him the football. Mills is going to be the starting quarterback. They just announced this before I started recording. He's going to be the starting quarterback for the rest of the season. That's obviously not great news for Brandon Cooks. They said that it, helps them win now, but they're not trying to win now, right? They know that that's not the case. I have Cooks projected for just under 11 half PPR points as a wide receiver 24, and I'm viewing him kind of as just like a high upside, very low floor flex play, right? I wouldn't feel great about it at wide receiver 2, but if you're looking for someone who could have 10 for 100 and a touchdown, it's Brandon Cooks, right? With the understanding he could also have 2 for 20 and no touchdowns, right? A very wide range of outcomes, but at least he is someone who can catch a 60-yard touchdown. That's not something you can say about a lot of people in that range. Jaguars at Titans up next. This game has a low 43.5 point total. Titans 9-point home favorites. For the Jaguars, you don't need to play any of the wide receivers, right? I have Marvin Jones 36th, LaVisca 44th, and Treadwell 52nd. If you find yourself in those ranges, I suppose it's fine. But even in a good matchup against the Titans, like, what part of this Jaguars passing attack is giving you any sort of confidence over the last, 2 months? They've had good matchups in the past, and they just cannot seem to capitalize on them. So personally, I would not start any of them, even in a good matchup. They're just desperation plays. For the Titans, A.J. Brown's still out, but Julio could return. He practiced Wednesday, practiced Thursday. He looks pretty decent. We've only seen a few clips come out of their practice camp, but he looks healthy, right? He looks fine. Now, we're not going to know probably. I mean, I guess they could activate him on Friday, but they don't have to activate him until Saturday, so I don't think they're going to. My guess, if you had to make me guess, is that they will activate him. He will play, and he'll play a decent amount of the snaps. They are not going to throw him out there for 100% of the snaps because they know he's Julio Jones. They know he's important. This is still a team that is looking to be in the playoffs, looking to make a Super Bowl run despite all these injuries. When they get A.J. Brown back, if they can have Julio healthy, this is a good passing attack. We haven't seen it this season because no one can be healthy all at the same time. But it's a good passing attack, right? So they're not going to throw Julio out there, especially against the Jaguars, right? They can beat the Jaguars without Julio. They're going to throw him out there and give him 100% of the snaps and have him get hurt again. So I don't think he's going to be some target hog, getting 15 targets and being used in every play. But I think he's so much better than the other wide receivers that they do have. And he looks healthy to that. If you got to play him, I'm totally fine doing that. I think it's as a flex. I don't think I'll have him ranked as wide receiver 2. But it is absolutely possible if you need him at wide receiver 2, you're good at flex, or maybe you just really need options this week, I think you can play Julio. If, again, he's activated. And whether he's activated, whether he's not activated, I don't want anyone else. I don't want their secondary wide receivers. It's Julio or bust for me. I think that if he's not activated, they switch up the game plan and they go very run heavy, throw to the running backs. They just don't use the wide receivers all that much. And so Julio or no one. Next up, we've got Saints at Jets. This game is another low, 43-point total. Saints 5.5-point road favorites. For the Saints, Traquan Smith is fine in deeper formats, but in a 12-team league, I don't think you have to go to Traquan. I know the Jets have a bad defense, and Smith is their number one, so that's just the logic behind playing Traquan Smith. But this is not going to be a team that's going to go out there and throw the ball every play. It's not a team that Vegas is projecting to score all that many points. They're not that heavy of favorites against the Jets. They're probably going to run a lot. They're probably going to play slow. I don't love it. I don't love the play. But you can. It would be a flex play. Again, 14, 16-team league, maybe you can slide him into wide receiver 2. If you're in a 10-team league, don't be playing Traquan Smith. If you're in a 12-team league, you can go there, but it's pretty thin, and you just can't be shocked if it's even against the Jets. If he goes out there and he has 4 for 45, right? They still have people. They still have other wide receivers, some tight ends. They'll use the running backs. They have other players they're going to spread the ball around to, and like I said, it's not a high volume passing attack. For the Jets, all comes down to Elijah Moore. He was a DMP Thursday after being a DMP on Wednesday. They said they're hoping he can play, but obviously it's not a good sign if he's not out there. If he is out, this passing attack is going to struggle to move the football. Crowder will be their top option, followed probably by Cole and then a combination of Berrios and Mims. But listen to those names. That is not a good wide receiver core. It's going to be very easy for the Saints to stop this passing attack. Tevin Coleman is out. They're probably not going to be successful running the ball because we know Michael Carter's not back yet. They might not score. I talked about this in the running back video. You have these secondary players who are going to get more work, but if the offense is only going to score 9 or 10 points, they're not going to have many yards. Do you want anyone? Probably not. And so I would lean away from this entire team. Again, if Moore is out, you can play Crowder as a flex play because he's going to be heavily targeted. but you don't want pieces in this offense. If Moore is able to play, assume that he's good to go. I'm going to assume that he's like a low end 2. If he was fully healthy, he'd be like a locked and loaded wide receiver 2. But he is clearly injured, and that's going to impact him if he does play. So more of a low end 2 to flex if he is able to play this week. Falcons at Panthers. Up next, this game is another low, 41.5 point total. Panthers 2.5 point home favorites. The Falcons. Russell Gage is really the only viable option. Gilmore is likely to shadow Pitts again, which is going to focus more work towards everyone else because Pitts is not going to be able to get open against Gilmore. Gage has 8, 7, and 12 targets over the last 3 weeks, and he's been fairly efficient with those looks. He's by no means like a must start, since the Panthers, like, I know Gilmore is going to be on Pitts, but like they still have very quality pass defense surrounding Gilmore, right? It's a really good defense, and the Falcons aren't just some lock to go off this week. So I think he's a good play, going to be ranked inside the top 30, maybe in like the low 20s, but not someone you just have to be jamming into your lineups, right? But if you picked him up off free agency, you're seeing these like 8, 7, 12 targets. You're seeing the matchup at least lean towards him away from Pitts. He's not a bad play. He's fine to use in the flex, but no one else. You're not starting any of the Falcons wide receiver. For the Panthers, it is DJ Moore and no one else. He has been their best wide receiver by a mile this season. Hasn't been as good lately just because, the offense hasn't been as good. The passing attack hasn't been as good. But he's very talented. This is a good matchup against the Falcons. I think you're playing him as a wide receiver too. It's a low floor option because if you look at his game log the last few months, he's had a very low floor. But he's talented enough to where as long as they're not posting like a complete 0 on offense, I think he's going to be fine. Now, they want to run the ball more, which I don't fully understand. But when they do go to pass it, it's going to be DJ Moore, and it's not going to be anyone else. So I think you're playing DJ Moore as wide receiver 2. You're kind of fading these recent box scores. 4 o'clock game is going to start off with Lions at Broncos. This game has a low, 42.5 point total. Broncos 10 point home favorites for the Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the only one I would want to play. We talked earlier in the week about how he's likely the one they're going to want to try and develop to close out the season. I, again, don't think he's a high-end talent, so I don't think this is some monster breakout happening. Also, a lot of his routes are very close to the line of scrimmage, and so he had 10 receptions last week, but it went for like 85, 86 yards. That's not a fluke. That's like something that'll happen with him. If he's going to post a spiked week, he needs like 10 receptions. He's not going to get there on 3 or 4 like some other players can. With that being said, he's been playing like 85, 98, 96% of the snaps the last 3 weeks. Like I also said just a few seconds ago, that's probably going to continue. They want to develop him, and it's not like they have any other real talent that's pushing him for looks. I think that the most likely outcome is he's in that like 4 or 5 reception range, 40, 50 yards, probably doesn't score. That projection-wise is going to rank you around the wide receiver 35. If you're looking for ceiling, this is not your option. If you're looking for like locked-in points, especially in a PPR league, it's not bad because he's going to have some receptions. He's going to be fine. I don't like anyone else. Josh Reynolds is fine, but we're not trying to target awful teams, right? The Lions are not going to do well this week, so we don't need to be going out there and playing their second and third most targeted wide receivers. Probably just Amon-Ra and no one else for me. For the Broncos, it's been tough to watch. Like Teddy is so far from the answer at quarterback for this team. He's good enough to like win some games, be in like contention in the division, but like everyone knows they're not actually in contention. They're close in record, but they're not going to make playoffs. They're not even going to sniff the playoffs. So he's good enough to like get you out of a lottery pick, but not get you into the playoffs, which is basically the worst case scenario for a quarterback. You either want to be losing or be in the playoffs. You do not want to be in that middle range of like, look, we won 7, 8 games. We're not going to have a high enough pick to improve that much in the first round to get a new quarterback. I'm hoping that someone goes there, whether it's Russell Wilson after the season, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, because it's a good team. They have a lot of talent at tight end, wide receiver, running back, but they have Teddy. And so that makes them ultra conservative, caps everyone's upside in the receiving game. Of course, Javonte Williams is a god, but it caps everyone's upside in the receiving game to where I don't really want to play any of them, even in a good spot here. You can play Jerry Jeudy because he'll be the most targeted. He's the most talented. But the most likely outcome is that they're winning this game. They're leaning on both Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. I think Melvin Gordon will be back this week. And we don't see that many targets for anyone, and that no one posts that great of a game. So personally, I don't have either of Judy or Sutton, but I probably wouldn't play them if I did have them. Giants at Chargers up next. This is another low, 43-point total. Chargers 10-point home favorites. For the Giants, I want no part of this passing attack. No one did anything when it was condensed, and now they're getting a little bit more healthy. I don't 100% know which wide receiver is going to play this week, but I also don't care, right? It's not something I'm paying attention to all that much because if Shepard comes back, now it's a bigger rotation when no one was doing anything. If he's not there, well, no one was doing anything before because none of them are all that great. And so just stay away. You don't need to spend your time or waste your time trying to figure out the Giants' passing attack. Don't go there. For the Chargers, depends on who's active, right? Keenan Allen's very unlikely to play, but it does seem like Mike Williams will be cleared on Saturday. Of course, check that. I believe if he tests negative again on Saturday, he'll be good to go, but confirm that. If that happens, you're obviously playing Mike Williams. It'll be a smash. If you want to throw a dart at Josh Palmer in deeper leagues, so only 14 and 16 team leagues, you can do it. He would see the field a lot more. I think he's talented and he's got touchdown upside, so I think he'd be a okay lower end play in deeper formats. If we get Mike Williams out, now Palmer and Guyton become more interesting plays in the flex in like a lot of formats. I would think Palmer would be my top option because even though Guyton is like better, I don't think his role changes all that much. Or Guyton's been better in fantasy like in general right now, but Guyton's a guy they just like use downfield. Palmer's more of like he'll just completely replace what they were going to do with Mike Williams, so he'd be the guy that I would want. Again, I don't think this happens because it looks like Mike Williams is going to play, but Palmer would be a decent option in the flex in every format, every scoring or every like league size if Williams is out. Again, I think he's going to play. Next game, best game of the week, Bills at Bucks, 53.5-point total. Bucks, 3-point home favorites. For the Bills, Diggs is a must start. Don't need to go over that. I think Beasley and Sanders are interesting this week. The Bills are going to have to be very pass heavy and will likely be trailing. So while these two haven't been fantastic recently, they're going to have to do something, right? If Buffalo is going to stay in this game. Sanders hasn't gone over 5 receptions or 95 receiving yards this season in any game. So Beasley's my preferred option because he's actually shown a ceiling, especially if we can rack up, 7, 8, 9, 10 receptions. He's my preferred option, but I view both of them very similarly. They're very low floor plays. I mean, they could both have 2 receptions for 20 yards, but I think they're good in the flex because I like the game environment. I like their projected game script. If Buffalo, gets down by 10 points early, and that turns into like, a 14-point deficit, a 16, 17-point deficit, we're going to see them go very, very pass heavy, play fast. That'll be very good for the wide receivers. And so because that is a possibility, I think you can still play those guys in the flex. Gabriel Davis is also interesting, though he hasn't been playing as many snaps as he should be. He should be playing more snaps. If he's only going to fall in that like 35-40% snaps range, you can only go there in deeper formats, but he's worth mentioning because if they're going pass heavy, it's possible he sees himself in the field more, and it's possible he plays well because he is, in my opinion, still better than Emmanuel Sanders, even though you got to rank Emmanuel Sanders higher because he's getting way more snaps. For the Bucks, tough matchup, but the analysis is basically always the same with Tampa Bay. You're playing Godwin, you're playing Mike Evans. Next up, we've got 49ers at Bengals. This game has a 48.5-point total. 49ers are 1.5-point road favorites. Like I said yesterday, the line's been moving in their favor, and it's moved even more in their favor since yesterday. For the 49ers, Debo is a DNP again on Thursday, so his status on Friday will tell us a lot. If he's a DNP again on Friday, assume he's out. We'll probably learn more when Schefter tweets something out, Saturday night. But I would say if he didn't practice all week, he's probably not going to play. If Debo is out, I view Kittle and Ayuk the same as last week, especially with Mitchell likely being out this week. I like them both. You're obviously starting Kittle. I think you're starting Ayuk in all formats. Again, if Debo is out, because they like to lean on Debo and Mitchell, right? You remove both those guys. They're a very game plan specific team. They're going to pick a few players and be like, all right, the looks are going to these guys, right? And when they look at the running backs, Jeff Wilson has not been great. Hasty's not someone they're going to feature. So they're going to feature Kittle a ton. He's probably going to explode if Debo's out again. But Ayuk would also be a very, very strong play in that circumstance. I know it didn't happen last week, but he would be a good play, especially because Mitchell's out this week. For the Bengals, Chase has been really bad recently, but he also dropped a long touchdown last week that if he brings that in, his stat line is something like 6 for 120 and a touchdown, and you would be like jamming him in this week. I do think that Higgins, playing better, earning more targets is hurting Chase, but I think that you're playing both of them this week. I don't really care what other wide receivers you have. Like, they're strong enough plays, especially with now a projected game script that's moving out of the Bengals' favor, so they're probably going to have to be passing a little bit more. Also, the possibility, Mixon is now like a game time decision. He's been sick all week. He's been missing practice all week. If he's not playing, well, they're not going to give Pirine the exact same number of looks as Mixon, so they're more likely to go pass heavy. That's going to be a boost for the wide receivers. And even if they don't, like, Mixon's clearly not 100%, so they're probably going to go pass heavy regardless. So I think Chase, Higgins, you're starting them. Boyd, a little bit harder to get behind. The ceiling is just not there, so I'd reserve him only for deeper formats. Sunday night game, Bears at Packers. This game has a low 43-point total. Packers 12.5-point home favorites. For the Bears, Justin Fields, Allen Robinson are both expected back, so that likely ends the Darnell Mooney target dominance. He is still the number one, and Robinson is coming off a hamstring injury. So while I believe in Robinson's talent, Mooney's the only wide receiver that you can use this week, and it's only as a low-end wide receiver too at best, preferably only in the flex. For the Packers, Devonta Adams is a little bit banged up right now, but he should be good to go. You're starting him. I think MVS is also in play. He's my 33rd ranked wide receiver right now, so you don't need to use him, right? If you have like 3 top 20 wide receivers, you're not even considering MVS. But he has 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. A lot of these targets are coming deep downfield. He's got upside. So if you need an upside play in the flex, you got MVS. I think you can definitely play him. Wouldn't go to any other receivers. Monday night game. Rams at Cardinals. This game is a high, 51.5-point total. Cardinals, 2.5-point home favorites. For the Rams, obviously start Cooper Kupp. Then I think Van Jefferson and Odell are solid plays in the flex. Both of them have downfield roles. Both of them can score touchdowns. And while the matchup is difficult, the game environment is good, and they're projected to be playing from behind. I have Van and Odell as the 26th and 27th ranked wide receivers, and I feel perfectly fine playing either of them in the flex this week. For the Cardinals, Hopkins played 74% of the snaps in his return last week, though he only had 2 targets. But it was also because of like the weather. They were winning in the game. They barely threw it. Like, don't look into the 2 targets too much. Look at the 74% of snaps and be like, he didn't suffer a setback. He's probably going to be like 100% this week. Maybe not 100% of the snaps, but he's going to be out there for basically all passing downs and all, passing downs that matter for the team, right? Unless they blow out the Rams, which is unlikely. He's going to be playing a lot. The biggest issue for him is Ramsey. He's not going to be shadowed on 100% of snaps, but he's going to see a lot of Jalen Ramsey, which is not ideal. Last time they played earlier this year, he caught 4 of 7 targets for 67 yards, didn't score a touchdown. I think a very similar stat line is expected this week. He's going to be around 6-7 targets. He's probably not going to be super efficient on them, but he can still catch something deep downfield. I think that you can play him as like a wide receiver too, just understanding that the floor is low. Like, Ramsey's really good. The Rams have a good defense. And, Arizona's perfectly comfortable spreading the ball around to a lot of different players. They're not going to force it to Hopkins. So, low floor, but he's DeAndre Hopkins. You can go out there and score 102 touchdowns. So I think if you got him, you're playing him. Beyond him, you can play Christian Kirk or Rondale Moore in the flex or second flex spot in deeper formats. I don't think you need to go there this week. It's not a fantastic spot. They're not getting enough expected targets to where you're like, ooh, I get to play Rondale Moore, right? Rondale Moore could have 0 catches this week. Christian Kirk could have 0 catches this week. I just mentioned them because in deeper formats, both of them could also catch an 80-yard touchdown. It's a great offense, high team total, and if, Ramsey is locking down Hopkins, there's going to be some looks for these guys. 10, 12-team leagues, you probably don't need to go there. Again, deeper leagues, it's fine. So that is my breakdown of every wide receiver core this week. Remember, you can see my exact rankings and projections under every scoring format by just looking at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.